Well, I said I'd never do it again, but here I am making a top 50 list, this time focusing on the 2022-2023 season. So bear that in mind as I go down this list. I am very specifically focusing on how these players have performed this season. There's a lot of players who, by the time this season is over, I imagine their ranking would be very dramatically different, but through 25 games or whatever it is so far, these are the top 50 players in the NBA. Before I get into today's video, I want to talk about our sponsor, Prize Picks. The best thing to me about Prize Picks is, as someone who is relatively new to this space, is just how simple and accessible it is. You look at the player's projected stats and you pick whether you think they will get more or less of what was projected. It is you versus the projections rather than against other people. The platform is super easy to use and to navigate, and while I of course am an NBA guy, there are still options like the NFL, MLB, NASCAR, and etc. And speaking of that, for the NFL this week, they are giving a free square for Justin Herbert this week. It's basically free money if you win and no consequence if you lose. And what's great for you is that if you haven't downloaded Prize Picks already, first-time users that use my code RUSTY will get a 100% instant deposit match up to $100. So if you put in 50, you will receive 50 back, and so on. So click the link in the description and download the Prize Picks app and use the code RUSTY to get a 100% match of your deposit up to $100. It is practically free money. Thank you to Prize Picks for sponsoring this video. Real quick, if you do enjoy this video, please be sure to give it a like, especially because it's probably going to get dislikes when I don't rank a player that some people like as high as they think I should. And subscribe if you end up enjoying the video. I am uploading daily in December. Real quick, just a couple of caveats. Players who have been severely injured or barely played, they're not going to count. So basically just Kawhi Leonard. I did include LaMelo Ball on this list because he at least did play well when he did play. Also, I personally wouldn't pay huge mind to the difference between 1 or 2 rankings. If you think a player is like 5 spots too low, feel free to tell me that. But if you're like, this player at 50 should be at 49, like, dude, come on, save your breath. So with that said, without further ado, I guess let's get into the list. And another thing, just don't be rude. It's just a list, man. And it's just me. If you think I'm dumb, that's completely valid. Let's get into it. I'm actually going to say the first 3 picks first because they are all top picks from the same draft class. At number 50, I have Jalen Green. At number 49, I have Cade Cunningham. And at number 48, I have Evan Mobley. Jalen Green is the lowest ranked among them just because I feel like he is the least versatile, even if he is probably the best scorer among them. Cade Cunningham is the most versatile offensively, but defensively, he's not bringing as much as Evan Mobley. And I'm simply putting Evan Mobley above the 2 of them because he is currently contributing the most to winning basketball. He is the second best defensive player on the best defensive team in the league right now. So I feel like that level of acclaim puts them over these other guys, but it's a very slim margin for all 3 of them. At number 47, I have DeAndre Ayton. I really feel like DeAndre being this low is the perfect mark of just how talented the NBA is, because we're talking about, even if he's mildly disappointing at times, a player who got a max contract because he can give you 18 and 12 and also be a pretty damn good defensive player. And that's a pretty high bar of talent, and yet he's the 47th best player in the NBA. That just goes to show you how talented the league is. And that's really the conclusion that I draw every time I put one of these lists together, but especially now, is wow, this is a very talented league. At number 46, we have probably this year's Rookie of the Year, Paolo Banchero. He has been scoring the ball fantastically. He's been rebounding the ball well. He's had a very nice natural passing instinct, even if his assist per game average is not blowing you out of the water. And defensively, he's been solid as well. So he's been scoring the ball well while also having a pretty solid all-around game. I do think that there is an argument for him to be ranked a little bit lower, but I'm personally pretty damn high on Paolo now and going into the future. Right above him, I have Lauri Markkanen. It's worth mentioning that Lauri has probably slipped a little bit as this season has gone along. I don't know why I say probably. He definitely has. Not quite as dominant in the statistics statistic department, but very much still quite a good NBA player, which he was not known to be before this, just a passable one. So very much still a big leap for him. He was nowhere near my top 50 in the past, but here he is now, and shout out to him for that. At 44, I have a player who I feel has gone pretty dramatically under the radar, and that of course is OG Anunoby. OG this year is making a strong argument for being the best perimeter defender in all of basketball. And on top of that, he's averaging an efficient 20 points per game. So OG Anunoby is absolutely a top 50 player this season. And if anything, he could potentially be ranked a few spots higher. But again, very talented league. I also want to say, since OG is here, that I didn't put Fred VanVleet on this list, even though I think Fred VanVleet normally would be a top 50 player, but he has really struggled to shoot the ball so far this season, so I had to knock him for that. Next, after just having a huge game, I have Anthony Simons at number 43. Anthony is another player who I feel is probably underrated because a lot of people outside of Portland's fan base aren't all too aware of just how good the guy is. When he signed a contract this last offseason paying him $20 million a year, a lot of people in the replies that I saw were like, who is this guy and why is he making this much money? He's making this much money because he's one of the best three-point shooters in the NBA, both off of the catch and off of the dribble, while also having very good overall ball handling instincts, playmaking, ability to put the ball in the basket, a decent enough finisher, a decent enough mid-range game. In a way, the guy emulates his backcourt partner Damian Lillard quite a bit. So not an overpay by any means. In fact, I would argue that Anthony is quite underpaid at this point. But more importantly than that, guy is just an absolute bucket. Now, he is also a 0 on defense. Otherwise, he'd probably be ranked a little bit higher. I mentioned Fred VanVleet as someone who's been struggling, but another person who's really been struggling to shoot the ball has been Christopher Paul. Chris Paul is shooting sub 40% from the field, and I believe sub 30% from three. The reason why he still ends up cracking this list and getting ranked over Fred VanVleet, because I could see how you might perceive that as unfair. Ultimately, I do believe that his playmaking, and even though it's not as good as it used to be, his defense is still quite valuable. Not to suggest that he's a better defender than Fred VanVleet, because he's not. But the playmaking that Chris Paul brings to the equation is still so fundamental and important to the success of the Phoenix Suns that I'm going to give him a little bit of a break for the fact that he just can't score right now. Hopefully that turns around, and I'm pretty sure it would, and I'm pretty sure as a result he would subsequently rank significantly higher. Because when I put this list together, I just absentmindedly put Chris Paul at like 30, and I was like, wait a minute, isn't he not doing very well right now? So here's the result. At 41, I have Jalen Brunson. And frankly, I have to apologize to Jalen because I did not really see this coming. I did not think that Jalen Brunson was going to be a worthwhile signing for the New York Knicks. And while the Knicks as a whole have definitely struggled this year to find any level of continuity and to step out of the just gigantic pile of mediocrity that they currently exist in the middle of the Eastern Conference, regardless of that, Jalen Brunson has been a huge bright spot. I don't think his stats are quite as impressive as they were to open the year, but the guy is just a master in the pick and roll and knows how to put points on the board. Weirdly, has a really good post game, even though he's 6 feet tall. Jalen Brunson is awesome, and ultimately, as much as I made fun of the Knicks for that signing, he's probably worth that money. I just don't know that I would bank my entire franchise's future on him in the way that it seemed like they did, but other than that, you can't get mad at this signing whatsoever, and Jalen Brunson, again, pretty awesome. And then at number 40, I have Domantas Sabonis. Sabonis is a fantastic offensive hub for the Sacramento Kings. He functions as a playmaker primarily within that offense, but also as a play finisher and a post option. His mid-range game is something that he can go to sometimes. Never really got a three ball to work out for him, but still, the guy is just really important to Sacramento's offense. And frankly, Sacramento is, I believe, one of the top 5 offenses in the league, and him being a huge part of that, he deserves a ton of credit for it. So Sabonis is the 40th best player in the NBA. But now we're cracking into the 30s, where at number 39, I have Zach LaVine, who is a player I would have liked to rank a lot higher, but I just simply can't. Not because he couldn't potentially be higher than some of these players, because he has been in the past, but other than the 40 piece he had the other day, he has has been horrible all season. And, you know, by his standard, I should say, it's still like a respectable efficiency, 20 points per game. But when you pair that with the fact that he's a horrible defender and a bad decision maker, his actual impact on the floor has not been very significant. And in fact, if you wanted to rank him a few spots lower, I really couldn't give you any grief for it. He has just not been great so far. And I'm just hoping that that 40 bomb is a sign of things turning around here. At number 38, I have Bradley Beal, another player who has been really disappointing the past couple of years, the past 2 years, including this one. He has been better than he was last year because he was really rough last year, but not quite the Supermax level talent that you want. I don't know that I would pay Supermax for the 38th best player in the league, but that's just me. At number 37, I have CJ McCollum, a player that I would rank lower than both of those previous two guards normally, except he's not struggling. In fact, he is thriving in New Orleans in the role of a point guard. I've kind of always wondered what CJ would be capable of doing as the lone lead ball handler on a team. And he's not the only one responsible for playmaking on that roster, but he is the primary playmaker at this point. And he's never really had that role before, but he's done it very well while also still being able to score the ball substantially well. I believe he struggled with his 3-ball this year. I haven't actually checked if that's gone back to normal or not, but either way, CJ has been awesome for the Pelicans and somehow better than two guards that I would always rank above him. At number 35, we have LaMelo Ball. LaMelo has played 4 games this year, but it was pretty much an exact replica of how he played last year when he was an all-star. So I'm not going to really knock him for that. LaMelo is still a very, very talented point guard. He has a lot of issues with efficiency at times, and he's not the strongest defender. But I also don't think that he has been in an offense that has fully embraced his star potential still, even though he has played at an all-star level. So for that reason, I actually think LaMelo should be ranked significantly higher, but he has yet to find a head coach to really embrace what he's capable of doing. Hopefully this new guy does it, or I guess not the new guy because he was there before, but not with LaMelo. But James Borrego severely limited LaMelo Ball's impact on the offense, and I'm hoping that changes. Then at number 35, I have Jrue Holiday, who has been really helpful for the Milwaukee Bucks this year, keeping their offense afloat. While obviously I can talk about the defensive contributions he has had, because Chris Middleton has been out, he's been asked to step up more offensively. And in the past, when you asked Jrue Holiday to step up more offensively, it would get a little bit ugly, specifically in Milwaukee. But that has not been the case this year. He's been relatively efficient, putting up about 20 a game, being a really good playmaker. Not anything that's crazy out of character, but they have needed him to step up, and he has. So shout out to Jrue for that. At 34, I have Bam Adebayo, who is finally being a little bit more aggressive offensively. He still has his issues being consistent with that aggression, and it's not like it's resulted in a crazy shift in his point differential, and the Miami Heat overall have been struggling quite substantially, and I feel like no one's talking about it just because no one really seems to care about the Miami Heat as much as I wish they would. I say that, I'm not trying to insult the Miami Heat, I just know that every time I talk about them, that video bombs, and no one seems to care. So either way, Bam Adebayo has been better this year. The Heat, not so much, and that's resulting in lower rankings for another player on that team later on. At number 33, we have my guy Desmond Bane. Desmond is one of the best three-point shooters in the league, arguably probably the second best right now. There are other people who have a conversation for it, like the previously aforementioned Anthony Simons, but the guy just hits his threes like crazy, has shown more and more capability off of the dribble as a playmaker, as a scorer, and I predicted him to be the steal of the draft, and just saying, maybe the Celtics shouldn't have traded that pick. That might have been, the Celtics might be scary if Desmond Bane was on that team. Just rubbing that in for all the Celtics fans, friends of mine. At number 32, we have DeJounte Murray. DeJounte has been a weird guy so far this year, like pulling out street moves on the floor, getting really mad at Paolo Banchero for no discernible reason. But he's really good at basketball, and he's also like taken a huge leap as a three-point shooter. In fact, let me look up the difference because I want to point it out. DeJounte Murray stats. It's faster than typing it. Last year, he shot 32.7% on 4.3 three-point attempts per game. This year, he is up to 6 threes a game on 36.6%, which, you know, it's not amazing three-point shooting numbers, but it's a good three-point shooting season for him for sure. And that really just, if that keeps up, he doesn't have any weaknesses in his offensive game. He's a really good finisher. He's good at getting to the line. He's a really, really good mid-range shooter, and now he can hit his threes. Is also a great playmaker, good ball handler. Not really many weaknesses for DeJounte, while also being an all-NBA level defender. In fact, if that keeps up for much longer, we might have to have a conversation about just how good he truly is, because he's really making up for the fact that Trae Young has been dropping the ball this year, even if Trae is still the better player between the two. At number 31, I have everyone's favorite player, Rudy Gobert. I'm sure that's the one that I'm going to get a bunch of crap for, because no matter where I would rank Rudy, it will piss people off. I will just say, last time I did this list, he was at like 18, so definitely fallen off a bit, and more substantially, really just more people have leapfrogged him. I don't know that he's a significantly worse player than he was 3 years ago or whenever I made that list, but he's definitely not 18 anymore. One of the best defensive players in the league, though. He very obviously has some holes within that defense, but that does not negate the fact that he is one of the most statistically impactful defenders in the history of basketball. Unfortunately, the offensive struggles that he brings to the table have been quite significantly highlighted, so that's a problem. At number 30, I have... Actually, no, I don't. I'm changing that ranking. Okay, at number 30, I have Anthony Edwards. I looked at that list and I just did not like where I had that. Anthony Edwards is actually kind of struggling a little bit this year, and really that's mostly due to Rudy Gobert's presence, so I'm not really going to hold it against him all that much. I will just say that I was expecting like a huge leap from Anthony Edwards this year, and it has not really come to fruition. But again, I don't think that's entirely his fault. It took him like a couple of weeks into the season to finally get a dunk because there was just no space in the half-court set. But yeah, Anthony Edwards. At number 29, we have DeMar DeRozan. Again, a player that I would have liked to be able to rank a little bit higher. But DeMar is just... he's been worse this year. There's no other way to put it. Not as substantially worse as Zach LaVine has been, but his problems have been very apparent. And if you watched my recent Chicago Bulls video, and if you haven't, go do so, I do think that the more and more I watch DeMar, the more and more I realize he's kind of the problem with the offense, because it's gotten to the point where a heavily contested mid-range shot is considered a good shot within this offense, and that's just unacceptable by modern day standards. And as much as I love DeMar, as much as I love his mid-range scoring, it's just not what I would like. At number 28, I have Chris Middleton, and I just realized as I was making arrangements that Chris Middleton has played like one game this year, so whoops, I shouldn't have ranked him, but at this point the list would be entirely screwed up if I didn't put him here. So yeah, Chris Middleton's a filler here. Normally I'd say he's probably around low 20s. So yeah. At number 27, I have Jaylen Brown. Jaylen has been awesome this year, and that's why I moved him up a couple of spots. While he still has his playmaking deficiencies, while he still has his inconsistency issues, while he's still a very overrated defensive player in my opinion, 27 points on crazy efficiency is 27 points on crazy efficiency. I don't know if it's crazy efficiency, but it's good efficiency, and you can't knock him for that. So yeah, dude's scoring the hell out of the ball, still a plus defender. His playmaking issues are obnoxious and overbearing, but overall he's still a plus offensive player when you can put the ball in the basket as well as he can. At number 26, we have De'Aaron Fox. De'Aaron Fox, previously mentioned Domantas Sabonis' role within that offense, but De'Aaron Fox has been the most important player within that offense because his slashing is all the way back to what it used to be. Meanwhile, his mid-range jump shot is just further encroaching on elite territory. Not to mention the fact that he's a great playmaker and competing with Ja Morant for fastest player in the league. He still has some deficiencies, like his 3-ball, and his defense is not anything special, but very positive offensive player at the very least. At number 25, hey look, we're halfway through the list. We have the player that I believe to be the most underrated in the entire NBA, and that is Tyrese Halliburton. Tyrese is currently averaging nearly 11 assists to 2.5 turnovers. That's like prime Chris Paul stuff, okay? So like, what else do you want me to say? While also putting up 19 points per game, shooting 37% from 3 on 7 attempts, getting 2 steals a game. The guy is a, as the kids say, a point god. And he is, I don't know, I'm not helping the old thing by saying crap like as the kids say. But Tyrese Halliburton's really good, and I'm probably gonna make a whole video focusing on just how good he is, so I'll leave it at that. At number 24, we have Brandon Ingram. Brandon is probably as high as I could realistically put him. There are probably 1, 2, maybe 3 players that some people would consider better. But personally for me, Brandon Ingram, I used to be not a hater, but just not as big of a believer in him as other people were. But the guy is just undeniably really, really good. He is a really great shot creator, and his all-around game has come around as time has got along. He's become more capable off the ball, especially as a three-point shooter and as a cutter, become a better playmaker, a better defensive player, pretty much just across the board been a better and better player. And he is very, very slowly building up and making his way towards actually justifying the hype that he had coming into the draft. Of course, he's not going to be the next Kevin Durant like some people said, but he's going to get close enough that it's like respectable. So yeah, shout out to Brandon Ingram. That Pelicans roster is just super duper talented. They have, spoiler alert, because Zion's on this list, 3 top 50 players, which not every team can say. At number 23, I have Karl Anthony Towns, which I realize is higher than a lot of people would like him to be, and I understand the struggles he has had defensively, although to give him a little bit of a, not giving him too much crap, I guess, he is being asked to do something that he's just very much not built to do, which is to defend the perimeter. If he was back playing the center position when he was playing the center position, though he still had his defensive deficiencies, it was not, oh my god, this is the worst defense I've ever seen bad. So being put in that position, I really thought he'd be capable of defending the perimeter a little bit. Turns out not so much, but either way, he's still a generational offensive big man, and can't take that away from him. At number 22, I have Trae Young, a player that I actually originally had ranked higher, and then once again I was like, wait a minute, he has been struggling. He is shooting below 41% and below 30% from 3. That's not good. I don't know if you knew that, but that's not good. But either way, production-wise, he's still generating like 28 and 10. The Hawks are still decent, and he still has a 56% true shooting percentage because he gets to the line so dang much. So even if his field goal percentage and his three-point percentage leaves room to be desired, the guy is ultimately still semi-productive, still being efficient enough to justify his offensive contributions and suggest that he's still a very much a positive offensive player. The defense, that's another conversation, but I do think his offensive production is so good that it does justify the fact that he is arguably the worst defensive player in the league. At number 21, I have Darius Garland. I would probably put Trae above Darius normally, but Darius is just significantly more efficient and a better, even though still not a very good defensive player. So I can't really knock Darius below Trae when his efficiency has been substantially better, even if his production is a little bit lower. Trae shot the ball as much as Darius Garland does. It would probably result in a similar level of efficiency, but I don't know. That's just two different approaches to the game. Overall, I think Darius has been a little bit better of a player than Trae Young. Normally, not the case, although part of this highlights just how big of a believer I am in Darius Garland, more so than it speaks to my negative opinions towards Trae Young, because generally I'm a pretty pro Trae Young person. At number 20, I have Kyrie Irving. Really just the appropriate place to put him just by looking at him purely from a talent perspective, which is an annoying caveat that I have to say about Kyrie. His efficiency is a little bit down this year in the 17 games that he has played, but still a bucket, still a capable enough playmaker, still sometimes tries on defense, and still really efficient, even though the efficiency is down a little bit. So yeah, Kyrie Irving is still very much good at basketball at the very least. That's really the only thing he has going for him at this point. At number 19, 19, I have James Harden. Frankly, I hoped that James would rank a little bit higher on this list, especially after he opened the season very, very strong. The other day, he played a game against Houston where he put up an absolute stinker, but it was also his first game back, so I'll give him a little bit of a benefit of the doubt there. I still think it's possible that James jumps these rankings a little bit. Right now, this is probably the appropriate place to have him, I think. What's annoying about this whole thing is I don't feel like this list is controversial in the slightest. I also know it's going to be, so that's the fun part about doing this. At number 18, I can't believe I'm saying this, but LeBron James. If anything, that ranking might be a tad generous. 25, like 5 and 6, which is, you know, a little bit lower production than we normally see from him, but he's at like 44% from the field and like 33% from three, which is passable efficiency, but no better than that. And by LeBron standards, we expect a lot better than passable. And honestly, I do think the numbers are suggesting that LeBron is playing better than he actually is, because I mean, I made a whole second channel video about this, but just the way that the guy moves, the way that he makes decisions, it's just not the same that he used to be. LeBron was, almost everything that he did was very purposeful, and he went up the floor with a plan. He had a play in mind, or he also, maybe even not that, but he was just so good at reacting to the defense immediately that it felt like he had planned the possession before it even started, with the knowledge of what the defense was going to do ahead of time, like he could predict the future. Now, not so much. A lot of jump shots, not so much getting in the paint anymore, and when he does, it's just not as decisive as it used to be. At number 17, I have Paul George. Paul struggled shooting the ball to open the season and then immediately flipped that around upon the criticism hitting him after taking responsibility for his underperformance, so shout out to him for that. He has been injured lately, so not a huge sample size for him, but I do think this is the right place for him. At number 16, I have Pascal Siakam, who I feel like will surprise a couple of people with how highly he is rated, because I don't think a lot of people pay attention to Toronto outside of Toronto Raptors fans. And Pascal this year is averaging like 24, 8, and 7, like 7 assists per game, 8 assists per game, something like that. He's always been a capable playmaker, but this year he has been one of the best in the league, still scoring the ball super efficiently. His mid-range game has reached borderline elite status, still a great finisher, still a really good defensive player. Pascal Siakam is awesome, man. And when he comes back for Toronto with OG there, because he's been injured, Fred VanVleet figures his stuff out, I feel like the Raptors could be a potentially scary team. At number 15, we have Zion Williamson, who frankly could be ranked a little bit lower because he has not been scoring the ball as well as normal, but I can give him a little bit of a break, especially because he has been turning it up as late. He was at like 21 points per game recently. He's up to like 24 just off of the past couple of games. They've also been utilizing him as a playmaker more and more, which I just absolutely love, because I think he can genuinely be like a 6 assist per game guy at his absolute peak. So yeah, Zion Williamson is awesome, man. And I really like him. He was borderline top 10 his second year in the league. I do think he can get into that conversation as he starts to ramp up that aggressiveness and the Pelicans start to look for him a little bit more. At number 14, we have Jimmy Butler. I actually suggested that Jimmy would be ranked lower than he should be because of the Miami Heat's lack of success, but honestly, now that I'm looking back at it, these are all entirely fair. Jimmy Butler is Jimmy Butler. He's the first player that I ever was a huge fan of. The first player I ever watched break out into stardom. He is the second half of this YouTube channel's name. It's a mix between a nickname I had in middle school, which was Rusty, and Jimmy G Buckets. So I have an affinity for Jimmy Butler, but I also feel that he is one of the hardest players to rank in all of basketball, because in the regular season he is nothing substantially awesome, and then in the playoffs he turns into Michael Jordan. So how do you rank that player? I don't quite know. He's essentially like an even more exaggerated version of how people talk about LeBron James, where they're like, oh, this is regular season LeBron, and then he turns on playoff mode. good. Similar thing with Jimmy, except it's to an even further extreme where it's like if LeBron was the 15th best player in the NBA during the regular season and the best player in the playoffs. Not that Jimmy was the best player in the playoffs, but he is probably top 5. So yeah, he's a hard player to rank, but I guess this is where I have him right now. I know I keep saying just like, this is where I think he should be. That's kind of obvious, but I don't know, man. At number 13, I have Devin Booker. Devin Booker is someone who I have felt is routinely pretty overrated, but ultimately, like a lot of people would probably put him in their top 10, and I just simply disagree with that. But there is no denying the guy is really one of the more complete players in the league. I feel like one narrative that Suns fans are very often annoyed by in regards to Devin Booker is the suggestion that he is just a scorer, and that's just false. Guy is a pretty damn capable playmaker. He has proven that he can be a 7+ assist per game guy before Chris Paul joined the team, and he is a much improved defensive player. Pretty much the moment the Suns started winning basketball, Devin Booker was like, okay, I'll try on defense now. So yeah, Devin Booker is awesome. He's really, really talented. I find him mildly annoying, and I find his fans really annoying, but there's no saving the fact that Devin Booker is a top 15 player in the NBA right now. At number 12, I have Damian Lillard. Now, when we're getting encroaching onto this top 10, just bear in mind that it was really hard to keep some of these players out of the top 10, but the league is just as talented as it is. So Damian Lillard finds himself outside of the top 10, even though I believe he was playing like a borderline MVP level to start the year. That's just how the cookie crumbles right now. I don't really need to tell you who Damian Lillard is. You know. This next player, though, might require some explanation for how high he is ranked if you are not quite in the know. And that player at number 11 is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Another guy who I really wanted to put in the top 10, but he just barely did not crack it out over the 10 players above him. Obviously, that's why he's number 11. He is averaging like an efficient 30. He's the most efficient 2-point scorer in the league right now, but the highest points per game in the paint, and I believe statistically one of the 5 most efficient mid-range shooters in the league. So yeah, the guy has just been awesome efficiency-wise, awesome point production-wise. His 3-ball still doesn't go in, but other than that, there's really no flaws within his game on the offensive end because he's also a very capable playmaker, not a jump off the stat sheet playmaker by any extent, but definitely a capable one. And he's also super duper clutch, and the sole reason pretty much that the OKC Thunder are not a bottom feeder to the fullest extent. I still believe they're like the 11th seed or something like that, but they're playing competitive basketball consistently whenever he's actually there. Shai Gilgeous has taken a significant leap this year. Frankly, I never thought he'd be this good. I'm glad to have been wrong about that, and I think that spells a lot of excitement for the Thunder, and hopefully me personally, I am hoping that that means that he is going to be like more aggressive, or the Thunder are going to be more aggressive about trying to get into a win now type of thing. I think this year they tank for Wemby or Scoot Henderson, whoever it ends up being. After you get that draft pick, man, like start trying to win, because Shai is just too good to not do that. And you have all the assets in the world to put a contender around him pretty soon rather than later. We are officially in the top 10, and at number 10 we have Donovan Mitchell, who has been shooting the absolute lights out of the ball and been the most important player to the Cleveland Cavaliers, who have one of the better records in the league. So yeah, he has been fantastic this year, one of the best shot creators in all of basketball. And I mentioned Desmond Bane as like the second best 3-point shooter in the league, and like Anthony Simons might have a place in that conversation. Donovan Mitchell might have a place in that conversation, because while he has not had a crazy volume, I believe he's at like 8 or 9 attempts per game, which by today's standards is not a crazy volume, which is crazy. He's shooting like 43% on those, and they're like half pull-up threes, and it's just one of the best shooters in the league, and he's been the huge offensive boost for the Cleveland Cavaliers to leap them from good playoff team to straight up contender. At number 9, I have Ja Morant. Ja is finally hitting his 3-pointers while also being the second best slasher in basketball, I guess, because Shai Gilgeous statistically outperforms him there. I think the fastest player in the league, not quite a generational playmaker, but not that far from it. And yeah, like you give that guy a 3-ball, what else is there left to do? Because he's shooting 37 on 5 attempts per game, 37% on 5 attempts per game, not 37 threes a game. That'd be a little excessive. But he is hitting his threes, hitting his mid-range shots, I believe, as well. Floater game is much better than it was was when he entered the league, Ja is going to be a perennial top 10 player for a very long time, I think. At number 8, we have Kevin Durant, who almost feels a little bit too low, but then you take a look at the rest of the list and it kind of makes sense. Everyone knows I'm Kevin Durant's biggest hater, so I'm not going to go in too much depth about it, but the guy is, other than putting the ball in the basket and being a decent playmaker, I don't think he contributes really significantly outside of that. And obviously that's still, he's such a bucket that he's a top 10 player, but there's a far cry from him being the second best player pretty much perennially for like multiple years behind LeBron James. Now he's definitely not in that conversation. Although, hey, he is better than LeBron James now, so he got that wish. It just happens that both of them fell off. At least LeBron's 38, but you know, he also had an Achilles tear, so I'll give you some slack. At number 7, we have Joel Embiid, who honestly, you could swap him in number 6. And honestly, you could swap 9 through 6 if you ask me. Ja Morant, Kevin Durant, Joel Embiid at 7, and I'll tell you who number 6 is in a second. Joel Embiid's great. He has not played as much this year, but his point production and his stats all around are pretty much the same as last year. And last year, I believe he was second or third. I'm pretty sure it was second in MVP voting. So obviously, you're going to crack the top 10 if you were second in MVP voting level production. He has been great. And I don't know what else to say. These are top 10 players. Of course, they're great. But Joel Embiid, I think the only reason why he might rank under number 6 is just because of a little bit of a surge number 6 has been happening recently. And oh yeah, number 6 is Anthony Davis, if that was not obvious. I really think you could flip a coin between these two players. They're both putting up monster numbers. I would argue that Joel Embiid is a better offensive player, especially a more versatile one, a better playmaker, has a mid-range game that's actually semi-efficient and not a waste of everyone's time. But Anthony Davis, ever since he's made the adjustment to be much more of a paint finisher rather than trying to be a guard, it has subsequently resulted in him averaging a super efficient 31 while also being, I think, potentially taking the mantle as the best defensive player in the NBA. And while Joel Embiid is a pretty good defensive player, I don't think he's anywhere near the best. And that's ultimately the thing that puts AD just slightly over Joel Embiid for me. I completely understand if you think this run has been a little bit of a fluke. But again, we are ranking these off of 25 games of this season. And for me, I think Anthony Davis has been a little bit better than Joel Embiid through this time period. Getting into the top 5 now, we have Jason Tatum at number 5. Currently, probably the front runner for MVP and also my MVP pick going into the season. So, you know, shout out to me for getting that right. Jason Tatum has taken a whole nother leap. His finishing in the paint has become elite at this point. He's had an issue where he's focusing too much on drawing a foul or just not simply being willing to absorb contact. That's a thing of the past now. He is one of the best slashers in basketball. He is one of the best three-point shooters in basketball. He is one of the best mid-range creators in basketball. He is one of the best perimeter defenders in basketball. He is a really, really good playmaker, and his assists do not show just how good he is at playmaking. What else do you need me to say? There it is. At number 4, we have Nikola Jokic. While I do understand that Nikola Jokic has dropped his point production a little bit, the on-off numbers for that guy are just through the roof. And ultimately, his version of down numbers is still like 23, 11, and 9. So like still awesome, still super efficient, especially inside the three-point line. Yeah, I believe he's at nearly 60% from the field while averaging 23 a game. Like there's no knocking him for a like 4-point drop, you know? He's still phenomenal. He's still a way underrated defensive player, even though his defensive issues are definitely obvious. There's definitely ways to implement him in the defense that are not bad. At number 3, we have Luka Doncic. Luka is Luka, and I believe the video that I did recently was like whether or not he was the best player in the league, because if you watch him, sometimes you might think, hey, this might be the best player in the league, so I wanted to explore that, so go check that video out if you haven't. Most people didn't, so go watch that. But I ultimately came to the conclusion that he was the second best player in the NBA. I think number 2 is just this much better. So yeah, with that, number 2 is Stephen Curry. Steph is currently outperforming his MVP season in 2016. So I don't know what more you want me to say. At 35, at that, more threes, same percentage, more points, I believe, more efficiency, more assists and rebounds. Yeah, he's outperforming the greatest offensive season of all time right now. So makes sense that he would rank pretty damn high as a result of that. And then, of course, at number 1, no surprise here, Giannis Antetokounmpo. I don't know why so many people struggle to say that Giannis is the best player in the league, because when you are arguably the best player on one side of the ball and like top 5 on the other side of the ball, even though he quote unquote doesn't have a bag or whatever, like who cares if you're getting a super efficient 30? He's averaged like 34 over the past like 6 games or whatever it is. He's just the most dominant player in the basketball. He's the most dominant player in basketball, the most unstoppable player in basketball, and that's really all there is to it, while also being a generational defensive talent. And the Milwaukee Bucks currently have the 2nd best record in the league as a result of that. So this is my top 50 list. I don't think that lists are ultimately that productive, but I figured I would throw it together, especially because I get asked to do it all the time. I look forward to the comments hating on me for it, but that's just the nature of the game. I'm used to it. Anyways, shout out to Rudy for editing this video. It's a long one, and goodbye.